are back. Okay, so we're going to react to the age-restricted all parts World War I. This is maybe the longest video I've ever watched. So yeah, this is gonna be interesting. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. World War I. Oh my. Europe goes to war. This is long.
1914. The great powers of Europe are divided into two rival alliances. The Triple Entente, France, Britain, and Russia, united by fear and suspicion of Germany, Europe's new strongest power. And the Triple Alliance.
Yeah, true.
Germany, which fears encirclement by its rivals. Austro-Hungary, clinging on to a fragile empire. And Italy, seeking gains at French expense. The spark comes on the 28th of June in the city of Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is assassinated.
So this is going to be the setup, the story. I believe it goes a whole month until the whole war starts, so it's around July.
By a 19-year-old Slav.
Like July or August. No, I'm pretty sure July. And yeah, funny story how it happened. Literally, he missed, and then him and like 3 other guys or something, they missed the opportunity to kill him. He was sad and all that, and then he found Archduke Franz Ferdinand when he made a wrong turn to head to the hospital to check on the people that got injured. And well, like, that's not how he died. It was somewhere else. It was conveniently at the exact same place, and it's just really sad what happened.
Nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. Austro-Hungary accuses its Balkan rival Serbia of having aided the assassin.
Okay, Serbia did not really look like this. Like, I'm pretty sure not, but whatever.
And sends an ultimatum demanding humiliating concessions. Serbia
basically just take it over.
And Austro-Hungary declares war. Within hours, Austrian forces are shelling Belgrade. The Russian Tsar, Nicholas II.
The biggest people at fault are definitely Austro-Hungary, Russia, and Serbia, man. Like, they were just so idiotic. They started this whole conflict. It had nothing to do with Britain, France, or Germany. Germany had to defend their ally, or they'll just get nothing else. Austro-Hungary would have left, Germany would have been isolated and alone.
Feels honor-bound to defend Serbia, a fellow Slav nation, and orders the Russian army to mobilize. German Emperor Wilhelm II has promised his support to Austro-Hungary. He and his generals see conflict with Russia as inevitable, and the sooner the better, as Russian strength grows year on year. Russian mobilization is used to justify German mobilization, followed by a declaration of war on Russia. Germany knows war with Russia means war with Russia's ally, France. It has developed the Schlieffen Plan to meet this threat of a war on 2 fronts. First, its armies will advance rapidly through neutral Belgium to encircle and destroy French armies near Paris and win a quick victory. Then its forces can move east to deal with Russia, whose huge army will take much longer to mobilize. And so Germany declares war on France. 6 million men are now marching to war across Europe. Italy, however, remains neutral. The terms of the Triple Alliance don't bind it to join an offensive war. The United States also declares its neutrality. President Wilson and the American public have no desire to get entangled in Europe's war.
For a little while.
Britain is France's ally, but at first it's not clear if it will join the war against Germany. But when German troops invade Belgium, whose neutrality Britain has guaranteed, an ultimatum is sent from London to Berlin, demanding they withdraw. It's ignored, and Britain declares war.
Ooh. August 1914, opening moves.
A British expeditionary force lands in France. while the German invasion is held up for crucial days by Belgian resistance at the fortress city of Liège. German troops commit several massacres against Belgian civilians. The
That is
atrocities
true.
are inflated
But
by
they weren't told. This is just a small group of them doing that. It's still horrible that they did that, though.
Allied propaganda and helped
Yeah,
turn public
made good
opinion
propaganda.
in neutral countries against Germany. France, unaware of Germany's great encircling attack, launches Plan 17, an offensive into German territory. But in the Battle of the Frontiers, they're driven back with enormous losses on both sides. The British Expeditionary Force clashes with the German army at Mons, but the British are heavily outnumbered and soon join the French in retreat. The Allies make their stand at the River Marne, 40 miles outside Paris. Their desperate counterattack saves the city and drives the Germans back. Both sides suffer 250,000 casualties.
Already, 250,000.
The race to the sea begins as both sides try to outflank each other to the
That's
north.
just sad.
A series of clashes leads to the First Battle of Ypres, where the Allies desperately cling on and prevent a German breakthrough. There are more heavy losses on both sides. The two armies then dig in along the entire 350-mile front, seeking shelter from deadly machine gun fire and artillery shells. Trench warfare has begun.
Yep. The war at sea. There's not really that much war in the sea
British
areas, though.
warships win the first naval battle of the war at Heligoland Bight, sinking 3 German cruisers. Britain has the most powerful navy in the world.
Yep, true.
29 modern battleships to Germany's 19.
That's still so impressive, though. Like, almost, like, nah, I know it's not that close, but, like, Russia had, like, maybe 4 or 5 of these. You know, no one else, like, even France didn't have this large number of a navy. The fact that they got so close to the most powerful navy in the entire world, that's pretty impressive, but still, like, you know, good for Britain and all that.
They now impose a naval blockade on Germany, preventing contraband goods.
This was major
including
because
food.
blocking, they cut off Germany's trade networks and resources with other countries, which made a large starvation in the country.
From reaching it by sea. The aim is to bring
Brutal,
Germany's economy
but that's
to
how
its
World War
knees
I was.
and force it to surrender. But a week later, the British cruiser HMS Pathfinder becomes the first victim in history of a lethal new weapon, the submarine-launched torpedo. German submarines, or U-boats, have a surface range of 9,000 miles and can attack undetected from beneath the waves. They herald a deadly new challenge to Britain's command of the seas.
The Eastern Front.
On the Eastern Front, Russian armies invade East Prussia. But they blunder into disaster at the Battle of Tannenberg, where General von Hindenburg and his chief of staff...
This one was a very major battle because, well, they won so well they were able to push all the way and take Poland because of that. But Tannenberg was the start of the quick takeover of the Polish territory.
Erich Ludendorff masterminded a brilliant German victory, taking...
I'm pretty sure he also became the president of Germany, right? The prime minister or whatever, like in the Weimar Republic.
90,000 prisoners and destroying an entire Russian army.
Wow, man.
The Russians contribute to their own defeat by transmitting uncoded wireless messages. A second massive German victory at Masurian Lakes forces the Russians into retreat. In just 6 weeks, the Russian army suffers nearly 1/3 casualties. Meanwhile, Austro-Hungary...
Imagine that, like, that would be the armies they would have back in, like, Napoleonic era. 320,000. All of that within just, like, less than a month of war. Just all the dead, just like that. And remember, Napoleon's greatest invasion back in like 1813, right? Like he lost some level like that, right? 500, 600,000 men. Already, this is half of all the men that died within just less than a month. Meanwhile, Napoleon's assault was like everybody in Europe. This was just all bam like that. You gotta understand, the turn of the 20th century was very tremendous, and the growth of the 19th century, the population was so enormous. This was a massive buildup because the last time they had wars like these, where all of Europe was at war, was Napoleonic era. It's back at it, except at a grand height. And if you think that one was bad, wait till World War II.
Hungary's invasion of Serbia suffers a humiliating reverse at the Battle of Tser. Austro-Hungary's offensive against Russia also ends in disaster and retreat, with the loss of more than 300,000 men. The fortress town of Przemysl is cut off and besieged by the Russians. The Germans are forced to come to the rescue, launching a diversionary attack towards Warsaw. It leads to weeks of brutal winter fighting around the Polish city of Łódź, but there is no clear winner. Meanwhile, the Turkish Ottoman Empire has joined the Central Powers, declaring war on its old enemy, Russia. Turkish warships bombard the Russian ports of Odessa and Sevastopol, while in the Caucasus, Russian troops cross the Turkish frontier.
A world at war.
Beyond Europe, the war rages on the world's oceans and in far-flung European colonies.
This is the first war that really like got everybody in on it. Maybe other than South America, but it really did attract many to get in on it. So this was kind of the first technical world war. The last time the entire world, like quote unquote world, had a war was maybe like, I wouldn't really say Napoleon, not Napoleonic wars. Maybe like the 7 Years' War. That's the only one I could think of, and even then, it wasn't really much of a world war. This war truly was the first great war, which there's nothing great about this war, obviously, very bloody and sad, but this truly was the first big major world war, really. You know, subtracting some other countries, but still, most of the world was at war.
German troops cross into British East Africa, modern Kenya, and occupy Taveta, while Allied forces seize the German colony of Togoland, modern Togo. But British forces invading German Cameroon are defeated at Garoua and Nsangakong, while a 3,000-strong force attacking German Southwest Africa, modern Namibia, is captured at Sanfontaine. A month later, British landings at Tanga end in chaos and defeat at the hands of a much smaller German force led by Colonel von Lettow-Vorbeck. Cut off from Germany, Lettow-Vorbeck goes on to wage a highly successful guerrilla war against the Allies, tying down huge numbers of troops. In Asia, Japan honors its treaty with Britain and declares war on Germany. Japanese forces go on to seize the German naval base at Tsingtao. The German colonies of Samoa and New Guinea surrender to troops from New Zealand and Australia. But in the Pacific, off the coast of Chile, German Admiral von Spee's powerful East Asia squadron sinks 2 British cruisers at the Battle of Coronel. Both ships are lost with all hands. 5 weeks later, he runs into a British naval task force at the Falkland Islands. 4 of the 5 German cruisers are sunk.
Okay, we're in December.
Goes down with his flagship. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, British troops seize control of the Ottoman port of Basra, securing access to the vital Persian oil that fuels the British fleet.
The winter, 1914. We enter winter. This is major because one war is with Russia.
That winter, Austrian troops finally capture Belgrade. But the Serbs then counterattack and drive them back once more.
Embarrassing.
The fighting in Serbia has already cost around 200,000 casualties on each side.
200,000, man.
In the North Sea, German warships mount
bloody.
a hit-and-run raid against English coastal towns, shelling Hartlepool, Whitby and Scarborough, and killing more than 100 civilians. On the Western Front, the French launched their first major offensive against the German lines. But the First Battle of Champagne leads to small gains at a cost of 90,000 casualties. While in the Caucasus, an Ottoman offensive through the mountains in midwinter ends in disaster at Sarikamish. Turkish casualties total 60,000, many frozen to death. On the Western Front, that first Christmas is marked in some sectors by a short truce and games of football in no man's land, the killing zone between the trenches.
That is insane, man. That is insane. 1915.
January 1915. World War I is just 5 months old, and already around 1 million soldiers have fallen.
Oh my.
A war that began in the...
1 million dead in 5 months. In the 20th century, just the start of it. Definitely, the 20th century was the bloodiest era of all human history. Like, that's... The 1900s was so bloody. You had World War I, 17 million dead. 17 million. That's hard to comprehend. And then you have even more with 80 million dead in World War II. 80 million. And then Cold War and Great Depression, like, just a lot. It's just this really sad and depressing to look back at. But it's also really entertaining to really see, like, this would make such great stories to learn more about. I wish movies would talk about these and, put a lot of respect towards these, these wars. Right? And, like, I know they do. I don't think it's enough. Hollywood doesn't talk enough about World War I, honestly. But you know what? Maybe they would probably ruin it, so...
has engulfed much of the world. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire
Animation's awesome.
fight the Allies, Britain, France, Russia, Serbia and Montenegro, Belgium, and Japan. In
Where is
Poland
it?
and the Baltic, the Russian army has suffered a string of massive defeats, but continues to battle German and Austro-Hungarian forces. Austro-Hungarian troops have also suffered huge losses and are humiliated by their failure to defeat Serbia. In the Caucasus Mountains, Russian and Ottoman forces fight each other in freezing winter conditions. While on the Western Front, French, British and Belgian troops are dug in facing the Germans, in trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland.
Me, personally, if I were deciding how the trench warfare would go, Germany, I feel like it would be best to quickly take out Russia first, and then deal with them. And the problem is, though, that France has pretty good industry here. If they were to occupy a decent amount and border at the river and have just the best defense possible, right, I think that actually would be the best decision. But then again, it would be hard to, like, remove everything and, plan all that out. That would probably be very hard to do, especially seeing how all these countries are at you, and this situation is just not looking that great. They would probably have to lose a lot of land. That's what I would notice. But I think a small retreat wouldn't be that bad because if they're just pushing and pushing and pushing, it's only going to lead to more of them dying and the allies having better position, and then they just push back and bam. So it wasn't really the best decision to try and stick with what they had. Just retreat from your soil, border at the river, and I think that would probably be what's best. But hey, it's whatever. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me in the comments below if you're here this far. Total War. The early stages of Total War. And also, I would consider World War I probably the first modern day war, because it was the first time they ever used crazy technology that we'll probably get into, but one example is gas warfare, chemical warfare.
As part of the world's first strategic bombing campaign, Germany sends two giant airships known as Zeppelins to bomb Britain. They hit the ports of King's Lynn and Great Yarmouth, damaging houses and killing 4 civilians. At sea, at the Battle of Dogger Bank, the British Navy sinks 1 German cruiser, but the rest of the German squadron escapes. Command of the seas has allowed Britain to impose a naval blockade of Germany, preventing vital supplies, including food, from reaching the country by sea. Germany now retaliates with its own blockade. It declares the waters around the British Isles to be a war zone, where its U-boats will attack Allied merchant ships without warning. Britain relies on imported food to feed its population. Germany plans to starve her into surrender. On the Eastern Front,
Also known as unrestricted warfare.
Field Marshal von Hindenburg launches a winter offensive and inflicts another massive defeat on the Russian army at the Second Battle of Masurian Lakes. The Russians lose up to 200,000 men, half of them surrendering amid freezing winter conditions. The Russians have more success against Austria-Hungary. The city of Przemysl falls after a 4-month siege, netting the Russians 100,000 prisoners. Austria-Hungary's total losses now reach 2 million. Meanwhile, the British and French send warships to the Dardanelles to threaten Constantinople, capital of the Turkish Ottoman Empire. They believe a show of force will quickly cause Turkey to surrender. They bombard Turkish shore forts in the narrow straits, but 3 battleships are sunk by mines and 3 more damaged. The attack is called off.
Wow. Trench deadlock.
On the Western Front, the British attack at Neuve-Chapelle. But the advance is soon halted by German barbed wire and machine guns. British and Indian units suffer 11,000 casualties, about a quarter of the attacking force. 6 weeks later, at the Second Battle of Ypres, the Germans attack with poison gas for the first time on the Western Front. A cloud of lethal chlorine forces Allied troops to abandon their trenches. But the Germans don't have enough reserves ready to exploit the advantage. Soldiers on both sides are quickly supplied with crude gas masks as a chemical weapons arms race begins. The Allies land ground troops at Gallipoli, including men of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps.
The Ottoman Empire did pretty well. I mean, for its situation.
To take out the shore forts that are preventing Allied warships reaching Constantinople. But they immediately meet fierce Turkish resistance and are pinned down close to the shore.
This is probably their best success.
The day before the landings, the Ottoman Empire begins the systematic deportation and murder of ethnic Armenians living within its borders. The Armenians are a long persecuted ethnic and religious minority, suspected of supporting Turkey's enemies. Tens of
Ooh,
thousands of men, women, and children are
man,
transported
that's really
to the
sad.
Syrian desert and left to die. In all, more than 1 million Armenians perish. The Allies condemn the events as a crime against humanity and civilization and promise to hold the perpetrators criminally responsible. To this day, the Turkish government disputes the death toll and that these events constituted a genocide.
German advances in the east. They do absolutely amazing in the east.
On the Eastern Front, a joint
But
German
remember, it's still Russia.
Austro-Hungarian offensive
Massive
in
country.
Galicia breaks through Russian defenses, recapturing Przemysl and taking 100,000 prisoners. It is the beginning of a steady advance against Russian forces. At sea, the British passenger liner Lusitania, sailing from New York to Liverpool, is torpedoed by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland without warning. 1,198 passengers and crew perish.
That
including
was
128
probably one thing that really did get America ever so closer to the war.
Americans. U.S.
Sinking
President
the
Woodrow
Lusitania.
Wilson and the American public are outraged. But Germany insists the liner was a fair target, as the British used her to carry military supplies.
That is true. And I do believe Germany did announce that they were doing unrestricted submarine warfare. Like, America, I'm not gonna say they saw this coming or anything, but Woodrow Wilson and many other people like around there, especially a lot of the big companies like Henry Ford and all that, a lot of them did kind of want this war because think about this. All of them, they were putting on the finance and investment in Britain and France, but Britain and France weren't showing any gains. So the Lusitania, not gonna say they did it on purpose, that's dumb, but they probably, just saying, I think there was a little more to it than just it got sunk by mindless Germans. I think things are a little more complicated than they really seem. That's my own personal opinion, but it's whatever.
In May, the Allies launched the Second Battle of Artois in another effort to break through the German lines. The French make the main attack at Vimy Ridge, while the British launch supporting attacks at Aubert Ridge and Festubert. The Allies sustain 130,000 casualties and advance just a few thousand yards. That summer, above the Western Front, the Fokker Eindecker helps Germany win control.
The
of
Red
the
Baron
air.
too, right?
It's one of the first aircraft with a machine gun able to fire forward through its propeller, thanks to a new invention known as interrupter gear. Allied aircraft losses mount rapidly in what becomes known as the Fokker Scourge.
Italy enters the war. This one was major. If Italy joined in with the Triple Alliance, if they joined with them, with Germany, Austria-Hungary, bro, it wouldn't even be close. Like Italy, with Italy's help, it would have been a victory against the Entente. Like the Entente would have lost, the Germans would have won. Italy was major in this, and I believe that if I were some guy in 1915, 1916, and I learned about Italy joining the war against the Germans, that's when I would know kind of the war would be over for Germany, even after everything. Like, I would probably assume that Germany's not going to win. However, I'm not going to say it's an immediate loss. I would probably suggest that there could be more, but me personally, I think like seeing that definitely showed that Germany's most likely not to win this war. As soon as Italy joined.
Italy, swayed by British and French promises of territorial gains at Austria-Hungary's expense, joins the Allies, declaring war on Austria-Hungary and later
Look at
the
this
Ottoman
map.
Empire and Germany.
fight against
The
all
Italian
these
army
countries.
makes its first assault against Austro-Hungarian positions along the Isonzo River, but is repulsed with heavy losses. Meanwhile, the Allies face a crisis on the Eastern Front. The Russians have begun a general retreat, abandoning Poland. German troops enter Warsaw on the 5th of August. Tsar Nicholas II dismisses the Russian army's commander-in-chief, Grand Duke Nicholas, and takes personal command. It will prove disastrous for the Tsar, as he becomes more and more closely tied to Russian military defeat.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But at the same time, I do think he helped out with a lot of morale. He did help with some morale boost. However, yeah, he probably got even more blamed due to him being, well, directly in there.
At Gallipoli, the Allies land reinforcements at Suvla Bay, but neither they nor a series of fresh attacks by the Anzacs can break the deadlock. Conditions for both sides are terrible. Troops are tormented not only by the enemy, but by heat, flies, and sickness. In the Atlantic, a German U-boat sinks the liner SS Arabic. 44 are lost, including 3 Americans. In response to further US warnings, Germany ends all attacks on passenger ships.
The Great Autumn Offensive.
On the Western Front, the Allies mount their biggest offensive of the war so far, designed to smash through the front and take pressure off their beleaguered Russian ally. The French attack in the 3rd Battle of Artois and 2nd Battle of Champagne. The British, with the help of poison gas, attack at Loos. Despite initial gains, the attacks soon get bogged down, with enormous losses on all sides.
Eesh.
Allied troops land at Salonika in Greece to open a new front against the Central Powers and bring aid to Serbia. But the Allies are too late. Bulgaria joins the Central Powers, and their joint offensive overruns Serbia in 2 months. That winter, the remnants of the Serbian army escape through the Albanian mountains. Their losses are horrific. By the end of the war, 1/3 of Serbia's army has been killed, the highest proportion of any nation. Fierce fighting continues on the Italian front, as Italian troops launch the 3rd and 4th battles of the Isonzo. Austro-Hungarian forces, though outnumbered, are dug in on the high ground and impossible to dislodge. In the Middle East, a British advance on Baghdad is blocked by Turkish forces at the Battle of Ctesiphon, 25 miles south of the city. The British withdraw to Kut, where they are besieged. The Allies abandon the Gallipoli campaign. 83,000 troops are secretly evacuated without alerting Turkish forces. Not a man is lost. It's one of the best executed plans of the war. The
Insane,
campaign
man.
has cost both sides 250,000 casualties. 1915 is a bad year for the Allies.
Oh,
Enormous
yeah.
losses for no tangible gains.
Yeah.
But there is no talk of peace.
So bloody,
Instead,
man.
all sides prepare for even bigger offensives in 1916, with new tactics developed from earlier failures.
They progress
All
even
sides
farther with
still
this.
believe a decisive battlefield victory is within grasp.
1916. 2 more years.
World War I
Or 3.
was supposed to
Sorry.
have been a short and glorious war. But by 1916, a new kind of industrialized warfare had seen the death toll soar into the millions, with with no end in sight.
Crazy.
Naval blockades
They destroyed
were beginning
themselves.
to cause shortages of food and fuel across Europe. While thousands of women had entered the workforce, replacing the men sent to fight in their millions. All sides were preparing for a long war.
War of attrition.
The war has raged for a year and a half as the Allies continue to battle the Central Powers, recently joined by Bulgaria. At sea, the British maintain their naval blockade of Germany, preventing the import of food and other vital raw materials. Germany has retaliated with a U-boat blockade of Britain, but has to limit its attacks to avoid provoking the neutral USA, whose citizens have already been caught in the crossfire. On the Western Front, French, British, and Belgian troops are dug in opposite the Germans, both sides trapped in the bloody stalemate of trench warfare. On the Eastern Front, the Russians have ended their long retreat and stabilized the line, but their army has suffered huge losses. On the Italian front, Italian troops have launched a series of costly, unsuccessful attacks against strong Austro-Hungarian defenses. While on the Balkan front, the Central Powers have overrun Serbia, whose army is forced to make a bitter retreat through the Albanian mountains. Now, on the 5th of January, Austro-Hungarian troops attack Montenegro. They are delayed at the Battle of Mojkovac, but 3 weeks later, Montenegro is forced to surrender. On the Caucasus front, the Russians launch a surprise winter offensive against Ottoman Turkish forces. 6 weeks later, Russian troops occupy the city of Erzurum. In April, they capture the Black Sea port of Trebizond. Meanwhile, the British transport 2 motorboats to Lake Tanganyika in Africa. They finally arrive after a 10,000-mile trip by sea and land, and help the British seize control of the strategic lake from local German forces. The same month, in German Cameroon, German troops besieged on Mora Mountain for 18 months finally surrender to the Allies. It marks the end of the Cameroon campaign.
Wow. We're done. The mill on the Meuse.
On the Western Front, the Germans unleash a devastating assault on the French fortress town of Verdun. German General Erich von Falkenhayn knows France will defend this symbolic town to the last man. His plan, in his own words, is to bleed France white in its defense. It is the strategy of attrition. Verdun becomes one of the most terrifying battles of the war, a mincing machine, where infantry divisions are destroyed almost as fast as they can be fed into the line. In Britain, 1 million men have already volunteered for military service, but the government realizes it won't be enough. Britain becomes the last major power to introduce conscription. That spring, on the Western Front, British troops are the last to be issued with steel helmets. The nature of trench warfare produces a high proportion of head wounds. The German Stahlhelm, the French Adrian helmet, and the British Mark I steel helmet offer limited protection from shell splinters and shrapnel. Neutral Portugal has been cooperating with the British, which seems to offer the best chance of holding on to her African colony, Portuguese Angola.
See, I think one big problem with Germany, it's definitely the lack of diplomacy. So think about this. Germany, that's kind of it. Austria-Hungary, that, like, just the two of them. They have a lack of allies. They were unable to get other people on their side. I think one big thing could be definitely sometimes the pride. they saw themselves as very, very high mighty and great country, which it makes sense, but also to the perspective of other countries, they kind of see you as being they see a country like that as kind of annoying and less likely to want to team up with. So if they would have been smarter with diplomacy and smarter with being able to get other countries on their side, so like country charisma, I guess, they would probably be able to do way better than this. Maybe get Portugal on their side. I think they possibly could have got Japan on their side, like convinced Japan to invade British territories, occupying the British longer somewhere else, right? Or maybe like something, right? Like start more rebellions within Russia. Or oh, best example, Italy. They would have gotten Italy on their side earlier. Bam, the war would have been over within just a year.
9th of March, Germany retaliates by declaring war on Portugal. On the Eastern Front, Russia launches an attack near Lake Narok to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun, but it's a disaster. There are 100,000 Russian casualties, and the attack fails to divert any German troops from the fighting at Verdun. In Dublin, Irish Republicans launch an armed revolt against British rule.
That's when they
It
really
becomes known as the Easter
it would
Rising.
really helped out
It was put
Germany.
down after 6 days of street fighting.
The Arab Revolt.
In the Middle East, after a 5-month siege, British forces at Kut surrender. General Townsend leads 9,000 British and Indian soldiers into captivity. About half later die from starvation or disease. Britain wants Arab support in its fight against the Ottoman Empire, so it's promised Arab leaders an independent Arab state after the war. But now, Britain and France secretly sign the Sykes-Picot Agreement, planning after the war to divide the Middle East into British and French zones of control. Unaware of this deal, Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca, leads the Arabs in revolt against Turkish Ottoman rule. In the Battle of Mecca, his forces seize control of the Holy City. On the Italian front, Austro-Hungarian forces launch a surprise attack at Asiago. Italian defenses give way. Austro-Hungarian troops are poised to break through into northern Italy. That month in the North Sea, the German High Seas Fleet clashes with the British Grand Fleet at the Battle of Jutland. In the only major naval battle of the war, the British suffer heavier losses, but claim victory as the German fleet withdraws and does not re-emerge from its base for the rest of the war.
The big push.
For the summer of 1916, the Allies have planned major simultaneous offensives against the Central
The two
Powers
largest
from east
years
and west.
are 1914,
Now they need it
19.
more than ever
17.
to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun
So we're almost at the big point, 1917.
and the Italians at Asiago. The Russians launched their attack first. On the Eastern Front, General Alexei Brusilov has carefully maintained the element of surprise. His troops break through the enemy lines, in some places advancing 60 miles and taking 200,000 prisoners. This brilliant, though costly, Russian attack achieves its aim, as the Central Powers are forced to redeploy troops from other fronts to shore up the line. At sea, British cruiser HMS Hampshire, en route to Russia, hits a mine and sinks off Orkney. Among the 650 dead is Britain's iconic Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener.
No, that was stolen from Uncle Sam.
3 days later in the Adriatic,
The British are copycats.
Principe Umberto is sunk by
Or
a
should I
German
say,
submarine.
copy bulldogs.
It's the deadliest sinking of the war, with 1,900 lives lost. On the Western Front, Britain and France launched their major summer offensive, the Battle of the Somme. Hopes are high for a breakthrough, but the first day is a disaster. A long Allied artillery bombardment fails to knock out German defenses, and waves of British infantry are cut down by machine gun fire as they advance into no man's land. In the space of a few hours, the British suffer 57,000 casualties, a third of them killed. It's the worst day in the history of the British Army. But more attacks are ordered, and the battle will rage for another 5 months.
Romania joins the war. See, this is why I keep saying Portugal, Italy, like now Romania.
Romania joins the Allies.
Romania just, like I said, they would have been smarter with their diplomatic abilities. Like, I'm pretty sure they probably would have got Romania on their side. Like, you know what? When I really think about it, they really wanted this territory, so probably they would lose. But man, this really, really hurt them.
But despite an initially successful advance into Transylvania, Romania quickly faces a counter-offensive from German, Bulgarian, and Austro-Hungarian forces. The Allied force at Salonika tries to support Romania by launching their own offensive towards Monastir. With Serbian troops in the lead, there are small gains, but dogged Bulgarian resistance prevents a breakthrough. On the Western Front, General von Falkenhayn finally calls off the attack at Verdun. The French army has honored their commander, General Nivelle's promise. Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. But victory comes at a terrible price. 365,000 casualties. The Germans lose almost as many. Verdun remains one of the bloodiest battles in human history.
Oh my. Almost a
For
million
his
people
defeat
dead.
at Verdun, Falkenhayn is sacked, and Germany's heroes of the Eastern Front, von Hindenburg and Ludendorff, take command in the west. Meanwhile, the Battle of the Somme continues. Near the village of Flers, the British introduce a new weapon they hope can break the deadlock of the trenches. It is called the tank.
Yep.
But despite
I knew
some
it.
small successes, the first tanks are too few in number and too prone to mechanical failure to make any real impact. On the Eastern Front, Russia's Brusilov
I do believe Austria-Hungary did have some really early designs, even earlier than the British or French, but they just never did that stuff.
offensive
Bruh.
comes to an end. Casualty estimates vary wildly, but it's clear both sides have suffered catastrophic losses. Neither the Russian nor the Austro-Hungarian army ever fully recovers.
Million, man. 2.4 million.
On the Italian front, heavy
That's
fighting
insane.
rages throughout the autumn, as Italian forces make repeated costly assaults against Austro-Hungarian positions along the Isonzo River. The Battle of the Somme comes to an end amid autumn rain and mud. The Allies have advanced 10 miles at the cost of 600,000 casualties.
So
German
bloody,
losses
man.
are about 450,000. The Allies reassure themselves that this is a winning strategy, because at this rate, Germany will run out of men first. Meanwhile, disaster engulfs Romania as the country is overrun by the Central Powers. Romanian forces suffer 250,000 casualties. The remnants of its army take position alongside the Russians on the Eastern Front. That winter, Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria since 1848, dies. He is succeeded by Karl. In Britain, Prime Minister Herbert Asquith is forced from office and succeeded by David Lloyd George. while General Joffre is replaced as French commander-in-chief by General Nivelle, who promises victory through bold, aggressive action. Amid the comings and goings, US President Woodrow Wilson's attempts to mediate a peace settlement come to nothing. Neither side is willing to make concessions.
1917, man.
In 1916, World War I became a war of attrition. Both sides began to focus less on winning victory on the battlefield than grinding down the enemy and inflicting such enormous losses they would be forced to surrender. In 1917, the strategy will push Europe's major powers to the brink of collapse.
1917, the breaking point.
Germany knows it will lose a long war of attrition against the Allies, who have greater resources. So its leaders gamble. They resume unrestricted submarine warfare, believing their U-boats can cut off Britain's food imports by sea and starve the country into surrender within 6 months. But the new shoot-on-sight tactics mean neutral American ships will inevitably be caught in the crossfire, risking America joining the war on the Allied side. Just 2 days into the campaign, the SS Housatonic, an American steamer carrying wheat from Galveston, Texas to England, is sunk by a U-boat. The British then pass to the US government a telegram they've intercepted from German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann to the German ambassador in Mexico.
This one.
Germany is encouraging Mexico to attack America if America and Germany end up at war. The so-called Zimmermann telegram puts yet more pressure on US President Wilson to declare war on Germany.
The Russian Revolution.
In Russia, enormous casualties and bread shortages lead to riots and revolution. The Tsar abdicates. A provisional government takes charge, pledging to continue the war. But at the front, Russian troops begin to desert en masse. After a string of German provocations, the US finally declares war on Germany.
Yep.
It brings immense resources to the Allied cause.
This was the moment. I think the USA joining was the moment. The war was over. Forget Italy, what I said about Italy. The USA, and the USA was really the big one. Like, all these countries all are going out at, like, 3 countries. But, like, 4 allied countries against... Like, even just the USA versus the all 4 of them alone, I think that would make it kind of, like, competitive. Most likely the USA couldn't really beat out them 4, the Central Powers, and the Central Powers probably couldn't beat the USA. Probably would have been neutral. But them and all these other countries, Russia, Britain, France, Portugal, Italy, like... They can't handle that. It's just too much, man.
It will take many months to mobilize. And the German gamble of unrestricted submarine warfare may still pay off. April is the U-boat's most successful month of the war. They sink 886,000 tons of Allied shipping, an average of 17 ships a day, all packed with urgently needed food and supplies. Britain will face starvation if the U-boats are not defeated soon. On the Western Front, the British launched the Battle of Arras, a diversion to support a major upcoming French offensive. After heavy fighting, Canadian troops seized the high ground of Vimy Ridge. It's a limited Allied victory, but costs 150,000 Allied casualties to 130,000 German. Above the trenches, the First Air War has reached new levels of sophistication and deadliness.
Yeah.
The British Army is moving forward, but the Allies are still holding out. As the British Army pushes through the Atlantic, Reconnaissance aircraft are crucial for spotting enemy positions and directing artillery fire onto them. Scout aircraft or fighters try to shoot them down before they can execute their
A
mission.
dogfight.
New models of aircraft are developed every few months. But that spring, the superiority of German aircraft leads to heavy Allied losses in what becomes known as Bloody April.
The Nivelle offensive. Nivelle?
Three
Nivelle?
days after the fall of Vimy Ridge, French General Robert Nivelle launches his main offensive. Expectations are high. But after initial success, the advance bogs down and casualties quickly mount on both sides.
The Germans are always like smaller in the casualties though. Like, Germany has a higher population, yet they also have like the lower casualties. I don't know how they like lost this whole the Western front. Like,
Senseless losses caused
I don't
morale
understand
in the
because like
French army to collapse.
they had significantly less losses.
Whole units mutinied,
Maybe not
refusing to
significantly,
attack.
but they definitely had less losses,
General
less
Nivelle is
casualties.
sacked as French commander-in-chief and replaced by General Pétain, hero of Verdun, who promises no more suicidal attacks. That summer, at Messines Ridge, the British tunnel under the German lines and detonate 19 enormous mines under the enemy position. It's the largest man-made explosion in history to date and paves the way to a brilliant but highly local British victory.
It's massive. So like World War I has so much crazy stuff happening.
In
And
Greece,
it's just really sad,
King
man.
Constantine,
So
who
much
has
death.
favored neutrality, is forced to abdicate, and Greece joins the Allies.
See, another like
Russia's
Another
provisional
one.
government orders
another
a
one
new
bites the
attack,
dust.
but the July offensive is a disaster. The morale and discipline of the Russian army has collapsed. It can no longer be relied on to fight, and the Central Powers' counterattack is almost unopposed. At sea, the Allies begin to group their merchant ships into convoys, which sail under naval escort. The new system leads to a steady fall in losses. The tide is turning in the U-boat war. As discontent with the war grows in Germany, the German parliament, the Reichstag, passes a peace resolution, calling for a peace of understanding and reconciliation. It's ignored by the German High Command, which now effectively rules the country as a military dictatorship. In Belgium, the British launched their major offensive of 1917, the Third Battle of Ypres. It will be remembered as Passchendaele. Heavy shelling, rain and broken irrigation channels turned the battlefield into a sea of mud. In these impossible conditions, all hopes of a breakthrough soon fade. The attack is called off after 3 months, by which point the British have suffered 240,000 casualties. The Germans, 200,000.
Again, smaller.
On the Italian front, at the 11th Battle of the Isonzo, Italian and Austro-Hungarian forces batter each other into exhaustion. There are 150,000 Italian casualties, 100,000 Austro-Hungarian.
Italian and
That year, 1917, the list of Allied nations grows. Brazil,
See?
Liberia,
Bruh.
China, and Siam all declare war on Germany as a result of German U-boat attacks, or to curry favor with the Allies.
No, I just did it
China
just
will
because.
contribute many thousands of laborers working for the Allies in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia.
The Middle East, 1917.
That year in the Middle East, British forces avenged their 1916 humiliation at Kut by defeating the Ottoman Turks and marching on to occupy Baghdad. British forces in Egypt advance across the Sinai Desert, but are thrown back by Ottoman forces at the First and Second Battles of Gaza. In July, Arab rebels capture the strategic Ottoman port of Aqaba. They are accompanied by a British military advisor, Captain T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. That autumn, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issues the Balfour Declaration, expressing support for the creation of a national home for the Jews in Palestine. The aim is to rally Jewish support for the Allies, but the declaration contradicts existing pledges to Arab leaders. In October, the British finally win at Gaza, clearing the way for an advance into Palestine. 6 weeks later, General Allenby leads
It really
British...
felt like the kind of start of the modern day world. Like the problems we've had and everything really did kickstart a lot of this. Like, it's just really interesting to see.
Troops into Jerusalem, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule.
Caporetto.
With Russian forces in disarray, Germany is able to move troops from the east to the Italian front. At the Battle of Caporetto, they helped to smash through the Italian army, advancing 70 miles and taking 250,000 prisoners. British and French divisions
Austria-Hungary needs
desperately
Germany for
needed on the
everything.
Western front
They need
have
them
to
for
be
everything.
redeployed to shore up the line. In Russia, a second revolution brings Lenin's Bolshevik party to power.
Yep.
He is determined to end Russia's involvement in the war.
No war, no peace.
In France, Georges Clemenceau becomes prime minister. Nicknamed the Tiger, he promises total war and total victory. But for the Allies in late 1917, final victory looks uncertain. Russia has stopped fighting. French armies are recovering from mutiny. The Italian front has almost collapsed. And American reinforcements still seem a long way off. For the time being...
Yeah, because remember, the USA, they didn't have a military already operated. Like, it was mostly just states with troops, if you know what I mean. Like, it wasn't really generally that much. So it took a very long time for them to get ready. They even were preparing as far back as 1914, 1915, in case the war did happen. And led by Woodrow Wilson, the worst leader ever. He absolutely destroyed America, bruh. Like, he was the worst president out of any of them to ever exist.
The British are the only effective Allied force in the field. So the British attack at Cambrai with the first major tank assault in history. On the first day, nearly 400 tanks spearhead an advance of several
It's ironic
miles through
because
German defenses.
today the Germans are known for being the big
But then
tank
the
innovators.
tanks break down or are knocked out. The Germans rush in reinforcements, and the gains are lost. Finland declares independence from Russia. Romania, isolated by the Russian collapse, signs an armistice with the Central Powers. 6 days later, Russia also signs an armistice. The Allied Eastern Front is no more.
Oh, wait.
1917 has seen one
No war, no
major
peace.
Allied power, Russia, knocked out of the war. But the arrival of a fresh new ally, America. Germany knows only military victory can now save it from being overwhelmed by Allied resources, and begins planning one last massive onslaught for the spring of 1918.
This was the ultimate survival food of our forefathers. Cooled and sewn into bison hide bags weighing 90 pounds, it was
1918.
After 3.5 years of war, the Allies are in crisis. Russia
You bet
has
they
been
are.
rocked by revolution, and its new Bolshevik government has signed an armistice with the Central Powers.
Yeah, bad there.
Thousands
No
of
war, no
German
peace.
troops will
But
be freed up to fight on the
it's
Western
fine.
Front,
Didn't have to mention it
where the
anyway.
carnage of trench warfare.
Oh, hi. I'm just finishing recording. I'll be done like 10 minutes less.
Has
All right.
already claimed more than 1 million lives.
Oh, sorry, just. Yeah.
But Germany is also desperate. Britain's long naval blockade has led to shortages and social unrest at home. While America's entry into the war brings fresh manpower and vast resources to the Allied cause, Germany faces inevitable defeat unless
Yeah,
it
it's
can
kind of a
win
loss
quick
from here.
victory on the Western Front.
They know it's over. The Kaiser's battle. Kaiser's Sieg. Schlacht.
US President Wilson announces his 14 points. They outline his vision for a post-war world, including an end to secret treaties,
Secret treaties, free
a
navigation.
reduction in the size of
Wait, didn't he do secret treaties too?
armed
Partial
forces,
settlement of colonial issues.
self-determination for the people of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and an international organization to settle future disputes. But most European leaders dismiss
But America didn't even join the League of Nations. They were all Europe was all joining, but bro, America didn't even join the League of Nations, which is just funny to me.
his ideas as wishful thinking. At Brest-Litovsk, Bolshevik Russia signs a peace treaty with the Central Powers. Russia gives up vast amounts of territory in exchange for peace. 500,000 German troops can now be redeployed from the east to the Western Front, where German General Erich Ludendorff plans an all-out, last-ditch offensive to win the war. Ludendorff's spring offensive catches the Allies off guard. German stormtroopers, using new infiltration tactics, help to overwhelm the British Fifth Army, which is soon in full retreat. The German advance threatens to split the British and French armies, with disastrous consequences. So French General Ferdinand Foch is appointed Supreme Commander of Allied forces to coordinate strategy. Outside Amiens, British and Australian troops improvise a defense and finally halt the German advance. The German offensive switches to the north, targeting the Channel ports. But the British inflict heavy losses.
It's like something I would do in Hearts of Iron 4.
Prevent a breakthrough.
Not gonna lie. The dawn of air power. How much time we got
Above the
left?
trenches, the first air war continues
this
to
is-
escalate.
Long, so much information, man.
Each side now has more than 3,000 aircraft in service on the Western Front. But by 1918, the Allies have won air superiority, thanks to greater resources. On the 21st of April, Germany's most famous pilot, Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, is shot down and killed
Red
near
Baron.
Amiens. With
Yeah.
80 victories, he's
Brother.
the war's highest-scoring ace, and is buried by the Allies with full military honors.
That's so sad. The Germans did so
Britain's
well.
new
They were so close yet so
independent
far
bombing
away.
force launches a daylight raid against Cologne.
Even if they took France, like, I don't think the war would be over. America would have just destroyed Germany over time. It's really sad, man.
On the ground, Ludendorff's offensive switches south, targeting the French. German troops advance 30 miles, but are halted at the River Marne, just as fresh American divisions enter the line.
It's over from there.
The U.S. 1st Division
America
was the
sent, like,
first to see combat.
15,000 troops a day or something. It was over
3 days
by
later,
then.
the U.S. 2nd Division
I don't know why they continued even fighting. It's really sad. But, like, the reality is they lost.
By now, there are nearly 1 million American soldiers in France, with
Yep.
10,000 more arriving every day. The fourth
10,000
phase
every day.
of the German offensive leads to a 9-mile advance, but is finally halted by a French counterattack. In Italy, Austria-Hungary launches an attack at Asiago and the Piave River to support Ludendorff's offensive in France. But it's repulsed with heavy losses, and morale amongst the Austro-Hungarian army collapses. British and French troops land at Murmansk in northern Russia. It's the beginning of Allied intervention in Russia's civil war.
Oh, the Russian
on the
Civil
side
War.
of so-called white or anti-Bolshevik forces.
The White Army versus the Red Army.
On the Western Front, the Germans' final attack is defeated in the Second Battle of the Marne. Ludendorff's offensive has cost the Germans more than 600,000 casualties and has failed to make a decisive breakthrough. Germany's final gamble has failed.
It's over. Collapse. Really sad, man. Germany was doing so well, but unfortunately,
The Allies now
it's just
go
due
on
to
the
other
attack.
countries all around
At the
declaring
Battle
war
of
and making it
Amiens,
harder on them.
British, Australian,
If they didn't have
Canadian,
Portugal,
and French troops,
or Greece, or
supported
Romania,
by tanks
or
and
America,
aircraft,
or
advanced
Italy,
7 miles in a
Germany
single
would have
day.
won.
General
Germany's-
Ludendorff calls
This,
the 8th
you know,
of August
you then
the
include
Black
Japan
Day
too.
of
You know,
the
while we're
German
at it.
army.
If they would have been able to be much more smart with their
German troops are
diplomacy,
exhausted,
they would have won.
hungry, and demoralized. It's
really sad.
To surrender in their thousands. The Battle of Amiens begins the Allies' 100 Days offensive. Trench warfare is over. The Germans are in full retreat. In the Balkans, a new Allied offensive at Dobropolje breaks through Bulgarian positions. The overstretched Bulgarian army collapses, and 2 weeks later, Bulgaria signs an armistice. In the Middle East, British-led forces defeat the Turks at the Battle of Megiddo, taking 25,000 prisoners. Allied troops soon occupy Damascus and Aleppo. On the Western Front, Marshal Foch orders a general attack. British, French, and American armies reach the Hindenburg Line, a line of reinforced German defenses, and break through. Ludendorff informs the Kaiser that the military situation is hopeless and that Germany must seek
Yep.
an armistice.
Sad. Kaiser.
Germany
Hold on.
sends a request to US President Woodrow Wilson, who in return demands German withdrawal from all occupied territory and the Kaiser's abdication. On the Italian front, the Allies deliver the final blow to Austria-Hungary
It's
at
over.
the Battle of Vittorio Veneto.
Austria-Hungary sucked, man. They would have been better. It would have helped out way more.
And 300,000
Unfortunately,
prisoners are taken.
they were just their time was up.
With the Central Powers facing collapse, the Ottoman Empire signs an armistice with the Allies at Mudros.
This is a very entertaining video, not gonna
4
lie.
days later,
I didn't add as much
Austria-Hungary
like
signs an armistice
talking
with
in
the
it.
Allies at Villa
I'm on
Costa.
a time budget right now,
At
so
Kiel,
I
the
couldn't
German
really.
High Seas Fleet is ordered to make a suicidal attack on the British Navy. But instead, it mutinies. Revolution spreads through Germany. The Kaiser abdicates.
Wait. Is that Charlie Chaplin?
German Republic is proclaimed. On the 11th of November 1918, a German delegation signs an armistice with the Allies inside Marshal Foch's railway carriage at Compiègne. It comes into force at 11 a.m., but fighting continues until the last moment. American Private Henry Gunter is killed, charging a German machine gun at 10:59. He is thought to be the last soldier killed during World War I.
Wow.
3 days later, in East Africa, German General von Lettow-Vorbeck surrenders his army on the Chambezi River.
He's still
For 4
holding out,
years,
bro.
He has tied down huge numbers of Allied troops, remaining undefeated while cut off from home.
That
He
is
still
so
considered
impressive.
one of history's greatest guerrilla leaders.
You know what? I want to actually watch the Germany East Africa. Next time, we're just gonna watch just the Africa during World War One. That would be so awesome to check out. But unfortunately, the Germans have lost. 1919. This is not a peace. It is an armistice for 20 years. Marshal Foch.
The Paris Peace Conference opens at the Palace of Versailles, just outside the French capital. Delegates accept a proposal to create a League of Nations to settle future international disputes. The Versailles Treaty, signed in June, imposes harsh terms on Germany.
Yeah.
Its military is restricted in size. It must
100,000.
pay war reparations
Same
to
as
the
Belgium.
Allies. It loses territory to its neighbors, and its colonies are seized by the victors. Germany must also accept responsibility for the war in a war guilt clause, a source of lasting resentment in Germany.
I don't know why they were given punishment. Like, that was
The boundaries of Europe are redrawn.
100% the fault of countries like Austria-Hungary, Serbia, and Russia. They did that stuff. Germany, like, maybe they shouldn't have, but at the same time, they had no real choice in
It is
this.
after 100 years of foreign rule, while Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and an enlarged
The other big mistake
Romania
was they let the
emerged
power
from the
vacuum.
ashes of the Austro-
They left a very big power vacuum within these nations, which really just was horrible decision making. Not to the rise of Hitler.
Hungarian Empire. The Ottoman
I
Empire
believe Winston Churchill talked about adding a monarch into, like, bringing back the monarchy in Hungary and even Austria, but like that was canceled, right? They didn't let the Habsburgs back in, and look what happened.
is dismantled. New states, most under European control, are created in the Middle East. Here, as in Europe, the seeds of future conflict are sown.
Yep.
While in the Far East, former German possessions in China are handed to Japan, to China's outrage.
That's why China declared war, just so they can get Shandong back.
World War I claimed the lives of 9.5 million soldiers. 1 in
Massive.
8 of those who fought. 21 million more were wounded. 7 million civilians also lost their lives.
Oh my.
Huge areas of Europe were left devastated.
Belgium. Around 18 million lives lost.
Old empires vanished.
Yep.
New states were born.
Sad, man.
Lives across the world were transformed.
It's crazy. It truly
The
is.
world was never the same again.
Yeah, that's the conclusion of the video, I guess. And yeah. Hey, that was a pretty good video. Thank you so much for watching, and it truly was tremendous. I didn't get to really add as much commentary, but it was still a very entertaining video, and I'm very thankful for watching this video, like, you know, and getting to share this with all of you. I already did one with Oversimplified's perspective, but this was another interesting perspective from Epic History TV. Thank you, man. Awesome. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can tell in the comments below. I'll see you later. And yeah, Bennett out.